hope lives, always, even when it's somebody else's hope that we have to hold on to. Years ago, before I ever went to seminary, before I wore preaching robes and stood behind pulpits, I worked at a summer camp. I was a lifeguard. I worked on a ropes course. I taught kids how to ride in canoes and how to go fishing and how to go camping. The camp that I worked at was a special summer camp for children with medical and emotional needs. Every single week, we'd get a population of campers that would all have the same struggle or the same issue or the same medical diagnosis. One week, every child had cancer. The next week, every child had cystic fibrosis. The next week, every single one was HIV positive, or every one had had a brain injury. It's not a normal summer camp. It was a wonderful summer camp. For a lot of these kids, this was the 1 week a year where they got to be just like everybody else, where they weren't the odd man out. The odd man out was me, the one who, when I was at the pool, didn't have a transplant scar. I was the weird one. And it was at this special place that I began to see things about what hope really means and really looks like that I would have never seen anywhere else in my life. One of those stories comes going jug fishing. And I don't know about you, I am from Georgia, a very small town in Georgia, and not everybody knows what jug fishing is. And so let me share with you what it is. Jug fishing is very simple. You take something that floats, ideally a milk jug, anything that floats, and you tie a fishing line to it. You bait the hook at the end of that line, and then you throw the whole thing into the lake. What happens is when a fish bites on that worm or whatever bait you put on the hook, they start swimming away, and that jug on the top of the water starts following them. And so you chase them down in a canoe or a kayak or a boat, and you pull the jug out of the water to catch the fish. It's a fun way to fish because then you can fish with multiple jugs all at the same time. It's the only way to fish I've ever done where it really does feel like cheating because you've got 15, 20 different jugs in the water, all of them darting in different directions, and you have to chase it down to catch your fish. I used to teach jug fishing as a way to help kids in a canoe learn how to work together. Because if you can't communicate together, you ain't never going to catch that fish. That jug's going to keep going away because that fish doesn't want to be caught. So I had one kid that was with me during one particular week of camp. And this one kid, his illness was more severe than a lot of the other campers. Most of his days he was confined to a wheelchair because of his treatments. And so he needed a little extra help just to even be able to paddle the canoe. And so we went jug fishing together, and I've been doing this for years. I know how to jug fish. And this boy looks at me and says, all right, here's what you need to do. Bait the line and throw it in the middle of the lake. Now, I knew that there are no fish in the middle of the lake. That's not where the fish are. The fish go to the sides of the lake. They go to where it's dark and where it's shallow, not the center of the lake. But this kid was adamant, determined that that's where it needed to be. And I couldn't tell him no. And so we threw the jug in the middle of the lake. He said, now we wait. And so we watched all the other kids catching fish, chasing jugs, while we sat there and looked at a jug that did nothing, which I knew wasn't going to catch a fish. But this kid believed that it would. He just knew. He absolutely knew that this was the one. And I kept trying to steer us toward the side to maybe throw a jug out over there. I kept trying to suggest, hey, let's throw another one over there just in case. We can come back to this one. And he's like, no, we're going to miss it. I'm telling you, this is where it goes. We stayed there for over an hour. And eventually the time on the lake came to an end, and I had to blow the whistle and bring all the other kids in. And I stayed out there with him last, hoping that if we just continued to stay there, that maybe something would happen. But I knew it wouldn't. I knew. He just stared at this jug, almost willing it to move. And after all the other kids were back, and they'd all put their canoes away, all of a sudden the jug doesn't move. It goes completely under. I don't know how strong you have to be as a fish to pull down a gallon-sized milk jug full of air totally underwater and bring it down there and leave it there. But there was some sort of Moby Dick-sized monster underneath there. And the kid turns around real fast and says, "I told you. Now let's get him." We paddled around every time that thing would pop back up, and eventually we pull out a 3-foot-long catfish. A fish that is so big that when he holds it off to the side of his wheelchair, its tail is dragging the ground as we pull into the dining hall, and he gets to be the hero. And he looks at me and says, "I told you where the fish are. You just got to learn to trust me and listen." In that situation, it was his hope that I needed to hold on to. My own belief wasn't enough. I didn't think this was going to happen. I had long since cast this aside and said we are going to fail, but he didn't. For him, hope was not some pie-in-the-sky pipe dream. It was an absolute certainty of what was going to happen. And that's what we need right now. We need to find those people in our life that know for a fact that we are going to make it through this. And we need to stay in the boat with them, and we need to wait out this storm with them and watch as they finally turn to us and say, "See, you just need to trust me." Because hope lives always.